I want to talk to you about the changing tides. There is definitely a lot of things going on in the world today from a political standpoint, from a legislative standpoint, from a business standpoint. We've seen absolute extremes in terms of highs and lows. In Australia at the moment, I think the economy overall is underperforming. Cost of living pressures are off the charts. And depending on how the wind blows, it could be very, very challenging times ahead. And yet, I still see pockets of business doing incredibly well. People disrupting, people unaffected by whatever's going on around them, people completely unaffected by changes of government or changes in legislation, companies that are reading the tea leaves, getting on the front foot. And a really good example is a very well known Australian enterprise. It is a listed enterprise. I won't mention the name of the company, but they've read the tea leaves on what's going on in the US. So they were very aware that tariffs could come into play. They had seen how the Trump administration had worked in the first term of government. And they read the tea leaves. They predicted fairly successfully that there would be a return to a Trump administration, and they got on the front foot. So, almost 12, 18 months out, they were resetting their operations to make sure that tariffs would not affect their business. And they had the capacity to manufacture in the US and had certain operations going. It's really interesting how companies can take absolute advantage of, economic cycles, political cycles, and, your board, who should be really able to read where the future may lie, have contingency plans, really looking at the continuity of business and how we're going to operate and how we take advantage of changes in government or legislative environments, can really do extremely well. Of course, on the flip side, a lot of businesses have been caught flat-footed, and what it says to me is, we're in this environment now where you can certainly get into talking doom and gloom and be congregating with people who are thinking the sky's going to fall in, but you really want to try and really calibrate your business and your board of directors to forward thinking, and regardless of the circumstances, regardless of your politics, you're able to come out on top. And I think that's going to be a really, really big lesson for a lot of businesses, because quite frankly, I think a lot of businesses are going to go to the wall. They haven't moved fast enough. In Australia, we're seeing insolvencies off the charts. Organisations that maybe didn't read the tea leaves, and a good example of that would be the construction industry. These costs, building costs have gone through the roof, and they're stuck in legacy contracts that now do not fulfill the requirements, and they're being very slow in some cases to recalibrate their legislative paradigm. They're being slow to reset contracts. They're being slow, and as a result, many of them are hitting the wall. They're going into insolvency. So it's really interesting how organisations can get very set in their ways and maybe think, oh, well, it'll get better next year, rather than recalibrating or radically shifting business and going in a different direction. So I think, my key messages here are, there's a lot of changing tides, and, what I see in certain economies is, people who get very wedded to a political dogma, very sort of on one side of the equation and can't see the other side. When the change happens, you can really be caught out. In the Australian context, I think for board members, it just reinforces to me how important it is that you can walk the middle line, that you can walk with either side of politics. Politics now has really shifted in countries. You see governments shifting, every 4 years. It's not uncommon now to not see governments last, go the distance, and there's this constant change, policy change, legislative change, comings and goings. things. And so businesses that survive are businesses that can really sort of be very disruptive to themselves, but have board members who can really help guide through, what is now very chaotic in some circumstances. But as board members, you have to be able to be, really able to work on all sides of the ledger. And I do come across a lot of people who are very, very firm in their views. And I think to be successful in business and in life, you really have to be able to work in all circumstances and be very careful about getting into the negative kind of the sky's falling in mantra. And I think that's been really easy to do. It's a cop out, in my opinion. Over the last few years, we've never seen so much negativity in our press and in our politics and in our business environments. It is, maybe it was, 50-50 negative, positive. I think now business is, sort of, the 80% sort of negative talk and doom and gloom. And so it's really important that you really get very clear on your mindset and your values, and really be able to sort of be future thinking in your business decision making. But I think it's very, very interesting, an interesting time to be alive in so many respects. Changes that have happened just for myself in the last 5 years, I never thought I would see. The pace of change is very fast, and of course we've got technology change coming through now, which is again going to be very exciting, but maybe daunting in some respects. And so being on the front foot of that, and how you're going to accommodate that in your business, and how we're going to go forward. Definitely a lot of change. So maybe it's a good time to go back and read, Who Moved My Cheese? Because I think ultimately a lot of human beings don't like change. None of us really do, but we're going to have to learn to really embrace it and survive and thrive in this new kind of world and the way we're all operating now. But I think it's just, my interesting observations of the world at the moment. Definitely a lot of things happening, but I'm seeing businesses come out on top, and that's the thing that I'm really noticing, that businesses that are ahead of the curve, ahead of the legislative change, ahead of the politics, getting the relationship set on, with the right people, connecting in with the right people at the right time. They're the ones who are doing incredibly well. So my advice is try and get into the right group, because that's going to make a huge difference to your success in the years ahead.